Okie dokie artichokes. Welcome back. We gave you a little tour there of some of the photographs that we have that we didn't show in the beginning. Of course, beautiful pictures of Miss Lana Stempien with her family, with cousins. That was the group picture on her beautiful boat is what we're leaving in behind us. Different shots of her from work, pictures of the boat she loves, pictures of the map of the path that they took on that particular trip. And then there at the end, we had Charles, Chuck Rutherford. We had some photos of them together. We also had some photos of just him and a little listing for a group online that this lovely, lovely woman runs for missing people. It's called the Charlie Project because it was one of the first cases. This is one of the first cases she got interested in, and he is still considered by many people to be a missing person. But this lovely lady that has the Charlie Network, she has done so much work for so many other missing people, and her name is Megan Good, and so you should check out the Charlie Project. She had a friendship with Jennifer Mara, the founder of the Missing Persons Cold Case Network, and then Charlie Project became her baby after learning a little bit there. She started with this case, but certainly has not ended with this case. Okay, so sort of where we left off after part one was the most troubling question everyone had. Where was Mr. Chuck, right? They were trying to figure out what they thought might have happened, and of course, they had a lot of theories, some that left Mr. Rutherford in the same situation as Lana Stempien, and some that had him as more of a perpetrator than a victim. And I think as of today, people still are not sure. Some people, anyway. Some people have very strong opinions, one direction or the other. So, you know, of course, they had to ask, was there foul play involved between Lana and Chuck themselves? Or did they have somebody that wanted to hurt one or both of them that had nothing to do with their relationship or any dynamic they had going on? So it does, in this article that was written in 2006, it's represented as still very much bothering the Stempien family, that they have no information about Chuck whatsoever, and that his family pretty adamantly from the beginning, they didn't want that specialist, Mr. Cote, or Cote, C-O-T-E, who was the specialist about disappearances on the water, to help them in any way. They, in fact, encouraged him to stay away, keep his distance from their family, so he just continued to work with the Stempien family. Chuck's family did not want to do any type of interviews or give statements. The primary detective on the case, Detective Sexton, did speak to them a lot, right? They were very helpful and useful with law enforcement, and maintained that this family was just a family trying to cope like any other family would, and that this was just how they were choosing to go about it. They were being represented by Detective Sexton as being extremely saddened by the loss of their son, and saying that they were extremely private people and always had been. And they want questions to be answered in the same way the Stempien family does, just not in the same sort of public format, and that's sort of their feeling. A college friend of Charlie's or Chuck's, who kept touch with him for long after school, was very much in shock. His name is Patrick Quinlan. He was quoted in the article on ABC.com. Talked about, this was again in 2006, said it was just bizarre to have a body just disappear into thin air. And then the article sort of takes a little turn for a minute. It says bizarre and to some people suspicious. But Chuck's college pal is very upset by any suggestion that because Chuck is still not found, that he had anything to do with Lana's death in any way. So Chris Hansen asked, do you think there's a possibility that Chuck is still alive? His friend Quinlan said, no. Hansen said that he had something to do with Lana's death and somehow was able to get off the boat. Quinlan said, no, he's not a violent, hot-tempered person. It just doesn't match with who he is. Hansen says, we've been told that Lana told a bartender friend of hers that, quote, if anything ever happens to me, look at my boyfriend. Did you check into that? Is it significant? Detective Sexton answers, it's part of our investigation. So, though Detective Sexton wouldn't elaborate, Andrew Jarvis, the gentleman who worked with Lana, for the city of Detroit, and was also an attorney and seemed to know a lot about their hobbies and social life, checked out the story for Lana's family. The story about something that Lana said to friends in a bar. And got several sworn statements from different people confirming the incident. He says witnesses that he talked to told him the comment was made in a bar in Detroit a handful of months before Lana disappeared. And it was motivated by a story that they were watching on TV as they sat at the bar, and it was about the Lacey Peterson trial. And Jarvis says her friends did not believe she was joking. She seemed very nervous and very, very serious. So I guess I'm trying to see if I can find the exact quote. I think I have it somewhere else, but I mean, for the time being, what it is quote, she said, quote, if anything ever happens to me, look at my boyfriend. I've said that above, but it needs to be said again. I think it'll be said again in some of the other articles and notes that are referenced. This is something she said. Her friends were asked time and time again, do you think she was being silly? Do you think she was using dark humor? Do you think that she was depressed? And they said, no, we think she was scared. She looked very nervous after making that statement. Then Mr. Jarvis also says that he has other sworn documents and statements from people who described a scary incident at another bar in downtown Detroit, not too long before the statement she made about check out my boyfriend if I ever disappear. So the story on that incident that has all these people writing up affidavits. I guess the two of them, Lana and Chuck, were hanging out at a bar with another couple, and the story is that Chuck had too much to drink, became sort of belligerent and difficult. When Lana told him to straighten up because he was being embarrassed and that he was embarrassing everyone he was with, he started swearing loudly and calling her extremely vile names. And they say that his verbal abuse was really out of hand at that point, and one of them had to stand between the two the couple to separate them. Then two Detroit police officers who actually happened to be in the bar having dinner had to forcibly escort Chuck outside of the restaurant. According to the friends that were there, that kind of behavior had caused Lana to rethink her relationship with Chuck. Mr. Jarvis says, from those sworn affidavits, it indicates Lana was going to end their relationship with Chuck. She did not believe they had a future together. There's something else that Dateline found in their article that Chris Hansen and Dateline found. And they knew and found out that the very, very last phone call Lana made from her phone on the boat before she passed away was to another man, and it was a man that Chuck had a history of being jealous of. Jarvis, her friend, said it was a person who Chuck had expressed jealous behavior towards Lana or had been really agitated when she'd spoken to this particular individual on the phone. This was in the past. So 2 days into this trip, when Lana and Chuck were on the boat at 1:59 p.m. on Thursday, August the 11th, Lana left her male friend, this friend that agitated Chuck so much, a 1-minute voice message. It was said she was making plans to meet up with this friend. She was going to be on the East Coast for a cousin's wedding upcoming, and she was hoping to meet up with this person at that time. They said she was not planning on taking Chuck to that wedding, and he also did not know that Lana planned not to take him to that wedding. Chris Hansen then says in his article, and this is what he said, 27-foot boat, close quarters, you have to wonder if she's calling another man. Does he overhear it? Is there some sort of disagreement that leads to an accident or a tragedy? The Detective Sexton says, I don't know. Hansen says, is that an important piece of evidence in this case? Sexton says, we're still looking at it. Detective Sexton says, without any evidence, the possibility that a phone message caused an ugly argument is just speculation. Whether it happened or not, we don't know, but how could you prove that? Chuck's good friend Patrick Quinlan says, whatever happened on board Sea's Life, it's a big stretch for him to think that Chuck is now hiding out somewhere. Hansen asked him, you just don't buy it? Quinlan said, if he was still alive, somebody would have heard from him. Even Lana's family is cautious, acknowledging that no matter what was going on in their dynamic, their interpersonal relationship, Lana and Chuck's, that it may still have had no connection whatsoever to her death or to his disappearance. Just because they were having trouble in their relationship does not automatically make people believe that, then he is suddenly gone from upset boyfriend to absolute criminal, and disappeared himself. Then a lady, Pat Koskara, Lana's aunt, says, I feel so much for his family. That's got to be terrible to think about that every day, that your child may still be in that water. So Lana's family, the Stempien family, and the extended family is trying really hard to have a lot of empathy for the other family, to have a lot of empathy for Chuck himself, even though there's a few things, that they think is strange and they wish they'd known about, way, way before any of this happened. They still, aren't making assumptions that because he was a jealous boyfriend, that he was also a sort of murderous feeling fellow, that there's a big difference between point A and point B. And then the friend says, for all we know, Chuck could be recovered, his remains, and this could all eventually turn out to be a big accident. So then Chris Hansen, Mr. Hansen, goes on in his article to write, was it murder? Was Chuck involved? Or was it something else entirely? Because something surprising would turn up in Lana's toxicology report. So then it says carbon monoxide poisoning. So 3 months after Lana and Chuck disappeared, they finally got the toxicology reports back from her in the lab, and there was a surprising development because Lana's toxicology report revealed she had a really high level of carbon monoxide in her system at at the time that she drowned. Um, so at the time they were saying, after all this speculation, was this the answer? Was it an accident after all? Or Lana and Chuck just swimming dangerously close to the boat's exhaust and then got sick? Um, okay, so Chris Hansen says a lot of people believe that Tammy Swanson, whose name we giggle at, but not because Tammy Swanson is somebody to giggle at, just the name from Parks and Recreation. Tammy Swanson, Lana Stempien's cousin, says, I don't know who would swim with the motor running. You shut off the boat. Hansen said, so if she was in the water voluntarily, she would have shut the boat off? Swanson says, absolutely. Chris Crowley, Lana's cousin, says, I think the carbon monoxide makes the possibility that this was an accident less. I don't think that either Chuck or Lana would jump off the back of the boat and swim in the exhaust. Chris Hansen says, there is the possibility, though, that carbon monoxide or fumes got into the cabin. Crowley says, for both of them to be overcome and to fall out of the boat seems a bit of a reach. Lana's cousin also believed that if the boat was releasing dangerous levels of any type of chemical, especially odorless gas, that they would know, right? That the police would have found it or figured out something about it when it was in their possession. But when the police returned C's life back to um, the family used it to search the waters of Lake Huron, and so then this gave Mr. Hansen an opportunity to ask about the boat. At that point, so he said, "Did anybody feel sick, dizzy, nauseated?" Crowley said, "No, we didn't experience any problems." And some of the cousins and friends spent literal days on the boat. And then Hansen says, and both of the attorneys working with Lana's family argue it's a big mistake to assume carbon monoxide equals automatic accident. Hansen asks, does that, in your mind, rule out foul play? Jack Coate, helping the Stempien family in the investigation, says no, because a person could be forced to expose themselves to a certain high concentration of carbon monoxide poisoning. One theory is that if Lana were thrown off the boat, she could have inhaled a high dose of carbon monoxide as she struggled to get back on the boat. Andrew Jarvis, her friend, now the Stempien's family official attorney, says if it were foul play and she was thrown off the boat, she'd swim to the back platform and try to get back on, which is where all the exhaust would be bubbling up if somebody were trying to prevent you from getting on the boat. Toxicology report revealed something else. There were only negligible levels of alcohol in Lana's system, eliminating that original theory that Lana and Chuck maybe partied and accidentally slipped overboard. All of this puts Lana's anguished family right back at square one. and with all those unanswered, troubling questions. So Hansen says the watch, the fact that she had no clothes on, the GPS, the knob, the line, the fenders. What is the most bothersome part of all of this for you? Her cousin Swanson says that the answers aren't coming fast enough. Detective Sexton, this has been frustrating. We wish we had more answers than we do. So, unsatisfied, Lana's family, they decided to pay for their own private autopsy. They hired a different lab to do the forensic examination of the boat, the body, everything. Hansen asks, is it possible you're pushing this beyond where it needs to go? It's a tragic accident. We should just live with it. Crowley says, no, I can't subscribe to that. I know that we loved her deeply and we're a very emotional family, but we're also a very rational family. I firmly believe somebody knows something. Hansen says, how far will you go to get some answers here? And Crowley says, we're not going to quit. We're going to work for the next 40 years if that's what it takes to get these answers. Answers that might be beneath the waters, answers the family of the accomplished young man hopes will come soon. Answers the family of a beautiful model turned successful lawyer need to ease the wrenching pain of losing someone so amazing. So her cousin Swanson is quoted as saying, she was full of life. She had things to do. We had plans together, and to be taken this way. Then her aunt says, some days I can't think about it. If I think about it, it becomes real, and I don't want it to be real yet. I mean, honestly, I can't imagine anybody wanting it to be real ever. I don't think yet even needs to be a caveat there. I'm not critiquing her statement. I'm just saying that's some tough stuff. Um, that's some tough stuff. So that a lot of that information, as you could tell, came was pretty closely lifted out of Chris Hansen's article that he published online in um, 2006. I also referenced the Women in Crisis Inc. Where it says it's a well of thoughts on crime and media issues from women, criminal justice professionals, and authors. So, again, really early on, I had mentioned on August 11th, 2008, they wrote this article. Donna Pendergast wrote this article. And it was called Sees Life, Sees Death. And so it starts, again, like a lot of the coverage about this did, about Lana Stempien and how beautiful and vivacious she was and still is, right? And she was 35, a former model. She was an attorney. They called her the life of every party, too. She felt like she was really living well in a lot of areas of her life. And so the couple at the beginning talks about the couple when they first met again, how it felt like maybe to some of the friends, an unusual match, but it was pretty a good one on the surface because they had the similar jobs, they had similar goals. They both were, native Michiganders. They both understood a lot about the Great Lakes culture. She was more of a water baby by far than he, but he still grew up around there. And they just, grew up, went to school, got jobs, fell in love with each other, moved in and lived in, I guess, what they call a very, very quiet, nearly completely crime-free area. And They're referring to that area as Grosse Pointe Farms, Michigan. Makes me think of the movie Grosse Pointe Blank. I like that movie. Anyway, it's just about that locality. Um, but then it also talks about, things always are different, in public and in photos than they are in real life. Um, and how no one can really know what happens to any couple or family behind closed doors. And so later on, it talks about how later on in their relationship, and then certainly after this occurrence in August of 2005, a lot of information came um, to light. I almost said came up to the surface, but that might be almost too literal in a lot of ways. But um, so they weren't a perfect couple. I mean, a perfect couple doesn't exist, right? But it just they also were both very good at, people talk about how they were both attorneys. They both were very professionally driven. They both really tried to stay positive and be positive lights for their families, especially. And um, so people feel dubious that they would ever talk too much in public at length about their problems unless things got to be really off. Um, so, Ms. Pendergast, who is writing the article, talks about she really attached to this case early on because a friend of hers had lived right next door to this couple. And she had actually herself met them on a really casual basis, like when she would go to visit her friend or be in the neighborhood. And she had also been employed with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. And so it said she began shortly after Chuck Rutherford left that office, the prosecutor's office, to open his own business. So a lot of the colleagues at work still spoke of him and would socialize with him quite a bit still. Um, and then she says, okay, now I really like to talk more specifically about August 11th, 2005. We know the whole story about, where they were headed. They left their parents' house. They were in Belle River, Canada. Their intention was eventually the Mackinac Islands to hang out and have like a fun weekend together. And um, she does talk briefly about the weather and how, I guess, even just crossing in certain areas, trying to make this cross from um, when she boated was considered tricky on good weather days, and some of the days they were out and about weren't exactly good weather days. But that everybody viewed her. You okay, Joe? Joe, I'm going to hit
Yes.
mute for you, buddy. I'm going to hit mute
Okay.
for you, buddy, and then you can unmute whenever you feel like it. Okay. Um, so I'm sorry. So they were to Mackinac Island, and then I got a little more information about Mackinac Island, which was good here. Um, it is east of the Mackinac Bridge, which is that um, bridge that connects the Michigan's lower area to the upper peninsulas. And so it is, like sort of an important and historical little pathway into a very different area of Michigan. Um, and she talks a little bit. She touches on, even though, again, the weather was bad, everybody that knew Lana trusted her, even in tricky situations. She talks about the path that they followed in her article, which we talked about a little bit, and I don't think we have to, go too far into detail. This stuff is all available online, and hopefully I'm doing a good job at least citing the sources so that you can find them too. I'll probably try and leave some of them in the information box below as well. So again, talks over like the things that they did, having the meal with the couple, running into somebody at the gas station, her calling her favorite aunt to tell her some things about where they were headed, uh, and then that last call, that was the last call, when she called her auntie at around 1:30 p.m. on the 12th. And that is, or was that on the 11th? Let's see. I pay better attention to my notes. Um, I think it was the 11th, yes, that she called her aunt. That was the last time that they know that she made contact with anybody voice to voice. She did leave that message for her friend about the wedding, but so they didn't speak in, voice to voice at that time. It was just a voicemail. And then again, talks about the family already knew something was up. They were contacting the Coast Guard, and her father, uh, Edward Stempien, had been in the Coast Guard, so he had some friends there, and they were on their way already when that gentleman found the boat. She goes into a little bit more fervent detail about Lana's torn running shoe and with the um, knob from the GPS system embedded, which Joe and I spent some time looking that up, just trying to understand what it is. It's literally just a mount that somebody would put on a wall or a tabletop or something. It would be a heavier mount because it's on a boat that's moving and it really needs to support that equipment. That GPS is really, really important, especially when you're out on a big body of water like Lake Huron. Um, so it would be a really thick, solid item. So the fact that it was disconnected, the mount was disconnected from where it was mounted to, and then somehow managed to be lodged into her shoe was really confusing and strange. And people were having a hard time even still figuring out exactly how that happened or why that happened. And, they just go through some of the other details we've talked about. And so she also talks about two other things that really caught the police's attention at the time. Was the couple that notified authorities of the abandoned boat um, described those blue bumpers, those blue fenders that were sort of hanging and like extended by rope, tied to C's life in a strange way, as if some boat had moored up against that boat, but had left their bumpers behind. The family was very, very, very certain she had only ever purchased white bumpers. These were blue. So this was something, a point of interest that still has everybody quite confused. Um, and then also the GPS system, right? It was messed with. And that was strange. Not only um, did it sort of go quiet for a period of time that they didn't anticipate it being quiet, especially when Lana had put a lot of destination points into that device to help them stay on course and track and to figure out where they were as the weather turned a little rougher. Um, Matter of fact, it was something like they said she'd put in 2,000 little GPS points or notations, and they hit, as they passed by or whatever, traveled their path, they hit all but 115 of them. And then, so the fact that it was so relied on, but then it goes off for a very long period of time, and then all of a sudden it goes on again, somewhere around the range of like 12 hours after last time they'd heard from anyone, or that they'd heard from these two. So it was just, people felt it was pretty strange. And then again, um, they didn't seem to get many answers until sadly they found Lana, near the shore, right north of Hammond Bay, and some some miles from where the boat was found, but nothing, impossible. And when she was found, she was not wearing clothing. However, she was wearing a gold chain necklace. Her watch, we talked about before, that she absolutely treasured and took brilliant care of, and that she never swam with that watch ever, ever, ever. It was water resistant, but not waterproof, and it was very important to her. They touch again on the fact that there was a little bit of alcohol in the system, but that it was just so little that, like, there's not even much use in pointing it out. And then those of you that follow true crime do know that in a lot of cases, if somebody's physical self is left out in the elements, different ways, but still in many different ways, it can be possible for different types of alcohols, like, to build up almost like in the gaseous system of the body, as it is shifting from being habited by a soul to now no longer being that way. So, there's been a lot of talk in other cases about that, about how, sometimes when alcohol shows up in an autopsy, that doesn't really necessarily 100% means it was consumed ever. And then in this particular case, there was such a little amount anyway that it was, hey, this story about them, like, dancing and falling or being too intoxicated or skinny dipping, all of this is nuts. Um, and then the carbon monoxide in her blood, right? Again, it kept coming back to that. And I did a lot of reading on the break and tried to figure out, you know, do they see that in a lot of swimmer deaths? And the case is that they do see it in a fair number. Um, Sometimes that has, again, to do with the body and how it expels things or what it's exposed to, etc. But then also, uh, it can have to do with the fact that if somebody is near a boat, the boats give off a lot of exhaust. If they're near the back of a boat, or if they're in just a general vicinity where there's a lot of boats, they're sort of at that level where, um, absolutely they could be exposed to carbon monoxide. Um, so yeah, this lovely lady's article touches on these things as well. Um, so she also um, double, triple checks with, the coroner and all that, that they're certain that Lana's body entered the water nude but bejeweled in her jewelry, and they confirm over and over that that is the case. And then um, doubles back just briefly to talk about the GPS once more, that, around 1:30 p.m. on the 11th, things started being weird. And then um, at 1:30 a.m. on August 12th, the GPS suddenly gets turned back on. So
Another
yeah,
thing about
oh,
the GPS. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Holy heck.
I did not mean to startle you. Um, so sorry. Another thing about the GPS is that some of the data was missing,
Yes, yeah. Um,
and
I think I mumbled through that again, but I might have missed it, so thank you. Yeah. Um, Go ahead.
one consequence of that is it means that the boat may be located in a certain place and time that there's no record of because it's gone from the GPS.
Absolutely, he is right. And when we did further research, we also found um, that when they really looked into it, it with this particular make and model of GPS, it it was not something, especially in 2005, that could have been maybe switched on by a passing satellite or some other type of device. This thing had to be turned off and on extremely manually by a person. Um, the only way for that data to disappear is if it was intentionally deleted by someone. And so they have long been trying to figure out why that is. If it's just some sort of fluke that has to do with, um, just something where that they did intentionally, where they were trying to clear out space, or if this is if there's more to it than that. Anyway, I'm not completely certain where we were here. Things started happening energetically around, so I decided to clear up some of that energy. I'll be curious at some point to learn, with the protection of guides and angels, what that might have been about. I am curious, but um, always want to live in the light and protection and clear energy and keep myself clear and protected. And so I think sort of where we were was to a place where we might be wrapping up soon. Um, there were just a few more anecdotes that were going to be mentioned. For example, a few years after the disappearance, things got even more sort of tense between the families. Some people sort of surfaced and started making certain reports. One in particular was a person that came forward saying that he'd witnessed an altercation that was physical between Lana and Chuck outside of a Detroit bar. Um, and so, with the comments that she had made, with some of the blowups others had seen, and then this altercation, the knowledge that she was going to be trying to. Sorry, guys, that was just Joe. I'm going to mute him. Um, you know, the knowledge that, or the idea anyway, that she'd been planning on perhaps moving forward for a while or stepping away. That leads people to believe certain things. But the fact of the matter is, um, Mr. Rutherford, Charles Rutherford, to no one's knowledge, has ever surfaced. Um, he's never used any of his bank accounts. His mother maintains that she's never heard from him, and she used to hear from him very constantly. Um, there were a few weird things. The family didn't want the help of a very knowledgeable inspector right away, right off the bat. They didn't want that person in this. Now, maybe they were just very private, but it was interesting that they didn't want that immediately. Like, I understand if it had been a year or something, but it was right off the bat, and they said no, thank you. And then, um, I guess in the state of Michigan, if you're going to be declared deceased, you have to have been missing for 5 years if there's no proof of you being transitioned to the other side. And because his father was a big shot lawyer, he was able to expedite that process and in slightly under a year's time make that declaration. And it's curious, we could never understand why people do certain things, and what their reasoning is behind that. So even though it looks strange and it sort of feels strange in your gut, you can never be certain why people do things. And no matter whether that person is in physical or not, they're still not in contact with their family. Their family is still mourning a loss, and I don't think it, at least for sure, it doesn't sound like the mother or some of the other family members have any idea where he is, if he even is still in physical. Um, I can't say that for sure. I'll be interested to see what the readings say. Um, but, this could have just been a really unfortunate situation where two people um, wound up in the water. Um, and it's certainly sad. There's certainly a lot of things unresolved, and it did seem like the police really moved quickly. Things were strange a little bit, like the boat wasn't really processed. It was turned straight over to the family the next day, and when the family tried to give it back, they said, "Oh no, the rainwater did everything anyway, like washed everything away." And it was just, there were some strange things. Um, but maybe people just didn't know what to do. It's always hard to tell. We weren't in that situation. We don't know what the police knew then, know now. We don't know. So, um, yeah, I did want to say that I do think that even though a lot of this is very sad, um, as somebody that knows that people continue on, I think that Lana likely was very pleased to have spent some of her last favorite times on her boat. She loved the water, she loved boating, and I hope that in the afterlife, those thoughts and memories of being there bring her joy, and that she gets to spend as much time on the ocean or lake in heaven as she wants. And I won't lie, I do feel sort of funny in my stomach about Mr. Charles Rutherford, but I don't know anything. I'm just a person. I haven't done a reading yet. Um, I do know the energy around seemed upset, but I could never be sure if that maybe wasn't just me feeling confused. So I'm looking forward to reading it with the great help of guides and things moving forward. I know I always double back and sort of repeat myself a lot with information. I always want to make sure I cover it clearly and try to at least give credit where credit is due in terms of sources. So we for sure read a ton from an article um, that was on NBC News. Um, and we used a lot of this article from Women in Crime Inc. by Donna Pendergast. I don't think we lifted any direct passages from anything. These things were just very thorough. There are a couple of really great podcasts out about this particular case. I'm looking forward to reading further in to see if we can learn anything with the help of guides and angels and perhaps the spirits themselves. And I also am looking forward to just hearing about the joys of the lives that were lived, both in physical and now the lives that have been lived in non-physical since this occurrence for these amazing spirits. Thank you for your patience with this. It came out so late. We had a lot of unique things happen, and I hope to maybe learn why while still maintaining peace and harmony in my space. So I won't push it on the questions. I'll let the guides do that. Moving forward, we're probably going to be delayed just as we were for this in terms of when the exact reading comes out, but rest assured we will be working on it. It's a very interesting case. It's got a lot of energy around it. I'm very interested to hear what's going to be said. Thank you for your patience. If you've made it this far, please like this video. If you hated it, please dislike this video. leave a comment. Please consider subscribing. We're so grateful for some new friends that have joined us just this week. We look forward to having more new friends. And of course, we enjoy every day the blessings of our collaborators and old friends that have been with us for a long time. We definitely will be back Saturday night just to do general readings. We'll be offering those to people. And at this point, just wishing you love and light, peace and joy, and looking forward to speaking with you all very soon.